Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Think Future. My name's Calabucas, and once again, we're coming at you live from deep in the heart of Silicon Valley, California. We're talking innovation startups of the future, not necessarily those, and not necessarily in that order. If you're watching on YouTube, smack that subscribe button and hit that bell so you can get notified when a new show comes on. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast service, please subscribe and drop us a review on Apple Podcasts. That would be great. It's show 500. That's right, folks. We made it. We finally made it to show 500, and today's going to be a doozy. So I've always thought that the internet itself, in its original form, would be the thing that would bring humanity together. That the biggest problem that humans have with each other is the lack of being able to clearly communicate themselves with each other, clearly communicate to each other. Because we have all of these middlemen and walls and barriers between us. We can't talk to people on the other side of the planet. We can't understand what things are like on the other side of the planet. If people are closed up in a closed environment and they don't understand that life is better, then how can they work to make their lives better in wherever they happen to be? So this exposure to the rest of the world where things are better then maybe gives them some hope that they might be able to make their lives better wherever they happen to be. So I was always under the impression that the one thing that we could do to help uplift the human race, because I'm all about uplifting the human race, I'm all about making things better for everybody, is to extend the full breadth of the internet to each and every human being on the planet without filters. Anyone on the planet can talk to anyone else on the planet without filters, without government intervention, without big tech intervention, without any kind of intervention. Free speech around the world for everybody, for every single human being. I always thought that that was the trigger that would lead humanity into a new golden age. Because once you have every person on the planet being able to communicate to every other person on the planet without filters, now that's key. Because right now we have a situation where most of the people on the planet can talk to most of the other people on the planet, but there's plenty of people who can't talk to other people, and there's plenty of people who can't talk to other people through filters, because the middlemen keep these filters filtered in such a way that only some of the messages get through, right? If some of the messages from one person big tech doesn't like, or the media doesn't like, or the internet provider doesn't like, or the country doesn't like, then they don't get through. So we do not have the ultimate situation where every human being on the planet can speak to every other human being on the planet. Because I think if we could get to that point, I always thought that getting to that point would be the most amazing thing. That is the ultimate promise of the internet. True internet connectivity. Every human being to every other human being. Now that's what I always thought. I always thought that that was the best place for us to go. But then I started reading mimetic theory. I started reading René Girard, who's a French philosopher. I talked about mimetic theory in my previous shows, but in short, it's all about human beings not actually having real desires. All they do is mimic other people. And if you think about it, from the time we're born, we mimic everyone. We mimic our parents, we mimic our relatives, we mimic our friends, we mimic everybody else. How many times have you been in a restaurant and said, well, I want to know what the most popular thing on the menu is, or I want to eat whatever that guy's eating, right? When you see some delicious food coming, you may have wanted a steak, but then you see a delicious lobster coming by and go, ooh, what that guy's having lobster? I want lobster. I want lobster too. We do what everybody else wants. We want what everybody else wants. I mean, that's what keys mimetic theory, and a lot of the violence between individuals is because we both want the same things. Now, in a world with technology, and you can actually recreate things that are not unique, you can make copies of things, then there's a little bit of that mimetic theory goes away. But what's interesting about being able to be connected to all these other human beings, because if you think about, go back to pre-internet times, before we were all connected the way we are now, and the way we will be in the future, is that we were all in our geographic areas. And if you believe that mimetic theory is true, then we would always copy what was happening in our immediate area. So our family, friends, and our geographic area would be the models that we would use to copy our behavior, to copy our desires, right? But once the internet came along and things like Facebook presented the desires of all these other people and all these other celebrities and this huge set of people out there who we'd never had access to before. We had no idea what they liked. We had no idea what they were like. We had no idea what kind of lives they lived. Well, a little bit. I mean, you'd read People magazine, you'd read Architectural Digest, you'd read magazines, you would get some kind of indication of what kind of lives people led. And then you would see things like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, where there were TV shows strictly just focusing on these amazing lifestyles these rich people had. So once we started bringing other people's living rooms into our living rooms, people we don't know, people who are maybe echelons higher than us economically, or in completely different places, we can take these in two different ways. On the one hand, it's great that we have the ability to communicate with all these individuals across the planet. It's fantastic. Like I said before, it's great. But at the same time, our inbred mimeticness, our inbred mimicry is making us envy all of these new communications that are coming along. If we didn't know that our brother who lives somewhere else, or not our brother, but let's say a distant relative who lives somewhere else, was suddenly very successful, doing the exact same thing as me, or somebody I knew was incredibly successful, or someone who's exactly like me, say another person who's exactly like you, came out of the same schools, went up the same ladder, and all of a sudden is like much more successful than you. But you had no idea that person existed, or you had no idea of their success until you saw them on Facebook and connected with them and said, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? The envy, the mimicry comes in here. So the interconnectedness of all of humanity that I thought was such a great thing, I'm now looking at and going, maybe this isn't such a good thing after all. Well, I still think it's a good thing. But the problem is that we have to deal with this correctly. We have to deal with this correctly in the way that we need to understand that this is what we are like. Human beings copy each other, and we copy other people's desires. Stop copying me. Stop copying me. Stop copying what I want, and try and understand what you want, If you dig deep into mimetic theory, they say there's no way you can know what you want. It's always something that you've picked up from somebody else. That's fine. But if what you're seeing online is driving you to distraction because you're saying to yourself, I want the same things that everybody else is wanting, then what do you become? You become another same old person. See, we are in the most amazing world when it comes to be able to create your own version of yourself. Now is the best time to be able to look critically upon everything that's around you and say to yourself, do I need to be like this? Is the rest of the world making me like this, or do I want to be different from the rest of the world? And I think that's what we have to say to ourselves. How do we become different from everybody around us? Not the same, different from everybody around us. How do I take the combination of things which is me, the combination of desires which is me, the combination of things not that I am now, but that I want to be, and how do I create myself in a brand new way based on all of this that I see here? I'm not copying anybody else. I'm not doing what anybody else is. I'm not following the same footsteps as all of these other people that I see online, but I am using them to inform my new direction. So we need to take this interconnectedness. We need to take what we are seeing, and instead of automatically integrating themselves into us, we have to question. We have to use our brains. We have to use our reason. We have to use our minds to question What kind of individual do I want to be? What kind of individual do I want to create? What kind of individual do I want to be next? And you can integrate elements of your previous self, and you can integrate elements of your future self to create your future self. Use these as the building blocks to create the future that you've always wanted to have. And don't copy anybody else, because I know it's very hard. It's very hard not to copy what's going on in the world. It's very hard to look in the rest of the world and say, oh, I want the same thing that guy's. I'll have what he's having. It's very easy to say that. It's very easy to say, I'll have what I want. I'll have what I want, not I'll have what he's having. So next time, just as a test, as your first tiny steps into this future where you've become your own individual, completely disconnected from the rest of the world and following your own path, creating your own reality, instead of having what they're having, instead of having what somebody else is having, instead of doing what somebody else is doing, do something different. Be different. Boldly be different. That's it for me for today. See you next time, and until then, don't forget to think future.